welcome to a bonus episode of The Collider Witching Hour, because right now we have a very special guest in studio for a very special reason, and I think it's a big deal to have the very first horror movie of 2019. So, Director of Escape Room, Adam Robitel, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you both for having me. This is a pleasure.
I am so excited about this movie. So I've been given the okay. I'm allowed to say that I enjoy this movie quite a bit, and it's basically a horror movie that I think was made for my horror-loving sensibilities in particular. But I know you're not a writer on the script, so how did this script land in your hands?
Yeah, I was in post on Insidious: The Last Key, and I just signed with CAA, and they had a relationship with Neil Moritz and Ori Marmer, who were the producers on the project, and they brought me in very secretively and said they had something they wanted me to read. And I sat down in their offices in Brentwood and read it with Ori sort of sitting over my shoulder the whole time. I was very poker-faced, but to be completely candid, I didn't know what an escape room was. I'm a very old fart who doesn't have a social life. And so I read it and saw some real potential, but I was like, okay, I got to do some research. And I quickly went out and went to like 15. There's like 2,000 escape rooms in LA County alone. And I couldn't believe how popular they were, and immediately saw how cinematic they are. Like a good one, you'll be in like a Cold War bunker, and you'll be rooting around some spies like dossiers, and you'll solve a riddle, and then like a black light will turn on behind you that illuminates a map that was always there. You just didn't see it. And I was like, wow, for a visual medium, this could be really, really cool, particularly if the rooms were somehow psychologically connected to our characters. So I got really excited. And then, and then from there, we did another revision. We sort of sculpted the script more into this psychological space so that Maria Melnick, who wrote on Gods and Monsters, came in and she said, like, let's make this about trauma and make each of these characters have a trauma that they have to kind of deal with in the present. And I thought it was most important to me to excuse me. It was most important to have each character be, if it's a movie about puzzles, like the characters need to be a puzzle, because otherwise it gets really boring.
So you did this, or you first came to in post on The Last Key, which only came out about a year ago itself. How fast was that production process, and what was that experience like?
It was really fast. I haven't had a break in 3 years. I mean, knock on wood, I'm grateful for it. But we just went right into it, and we developed it for another couple of months, like 3 or 4 months of just serious sort of like revisions. And Maria had some great set pieces. She grew up in Siberia and in Russia, and this idea of like, we were very excited about making a movie that was also kind of beautiful, because in contrast to a lot of the horror and genre stuff that's out there, we wanted to say, like, let's make this, even though there's these grand guignol killings, let's have an ice room that's all Arctic, and let's go from fire to ice, and let's have this beautiful, lavish 1950s billiard room that's flipped upside down. And so, but to answer your question, we went right into it, and it was just no rest for the weary, and I shipped off to Cape Town while Insidious was still being finished. So it was and Blumhouse and Jason and Lee were very kind enough to let me go do it. So they were very supportive.
I have so many questions about that billiard scene. I feel like that's jumping so far ahead, but I have to ask. So I assume a soundstage, everything is built upside down?
No, we actually found an abandoned elevator shaft, and we built the whole thing. It was a soundstage.
Sounds incredibly dangerous.
I actually set some people on fire in this movie. It was really challenging. It was logistically the most difficult scene I've ever worked on, and
I can see why.
Yeah, and it was a small movie with with resources, but we were in Cape Town, and I'm really convinced I couldn't have done this anywhere else but Cape Town, because my designer Ed Thomas, who's done a lot of the Resident Evil movies, he hit the ground running like 2 months before I got there and started like building some of these sets. And the billiard room itself was so logistically challenging, like the scaffolding, because everything had to be structurally engineered so that when Deborah Ann Wall's climbing across the tops, it's safe, and And the set had to be built 6 feet off the ground because during each panel drop, we had to pull a panel, like an actual piece of the floor, light a green screen. And so it was very challenging. And we spent the most time in that room. I think we spent 8 days in that room. And we prevised, we storyboarded. Like one of the big issues we had was it's a big fishbowl. So like, where do you put the crane? Like, where do you put the camera? So it was a bit of a puzzle in of itself to kind of schedule it and to figure out like, oh shoot, the third panel's out, but the second panel is, and where do we put the camera on this shot? Oh, we're going to see off the set. So logistically, it was very, very challenging.
Even with the camera flips there too, I feel like that could be very disorienting just from your perspective to make sure everything's where it should be.
Yeah, it was really confusing a lot of the times. Like I have these great shots from behind the scenes where like there's like, a crew guy's feet like standing on the ceiling underneath the inverted pool table, and but I had a great team, and Mark Spicer, my DP, who had shot a lot of Fast and the Furious stuff, and he shot Lights Out, and he took me under his wing early on. And Insidious has a lot of in-camera scares and gags, but this was much more involved in terms of visual effects. I think we had more visual effects in Escape Room than Venom did. To put into perspective.
Boy.
They're smaller, they're not full CG characters, but it was a lot of cleanup, a lot of breath work and removing bolts and so forth. But anecdotally, we had one shot I wanted to do, which was the crane comes around, and when they finally solve the puzzle, it was going to flip upside down, and the ball's going to land in Deborah Ann Wall's hand. And we tried the shot. The new techno crane wasn't working, and it was like 3 hours of trying to get the shot. And so finally, they bust out this ancient, sparking crane that had no business being operable, but it got it, at the last possible moment. So it's great. We really got a lot of value on the screen.
The hard work on that particular scene pays off big time.
Yeah, and I think ultimately, without spoilers, I don't think people will expect for that particular character to die in that room. So I think that's also the emotional sledgehammer of a great set piece, but then also this big change that happens. Hopefully people don't see coming.
Were all the room designs in the script as you received it, or did you come in with a particular design in mind that you wanted to bring to life?
Yeah, it was iterative. I mean, I think Marie and I did a lot of research, and I have to give her credit though. There's a lot of specificity in every one of those because all of the puzzles were very intricate, and had to be linear in terms of storytelling. Like each clue leads to the next clue. So all of that stuff ultimately was on the page, and it was a process of, I wanted the lobby to fully transform, and that's the thing is some people are comparing it to Saw, or Cabin in the Woods, but for me it was like, this isn't about like torturous devices on people's bodies and stuff. This is like a living, breathing space that's going to change when the characters interact with it, and that's, I think, hopefully what separates our movie from other movies, and it's more about the Hitchcockian suspense. You call it a horror film, and that's great, but it has elements that are horror. But I see it really like in the vein of like a Hitchcock movie in the sense that the space itself is sort of the ticking time bomb, and but it was iterative. I mean, we wanted, for example, the lobby, which is cold and very much like the most grounded room because it's like they're stepping into the game for the first time. So we built, tremendous amount of LED tests to figure out like how can we turn this room into an oven in the most efficient yet cool way, and that was Spicer just figuring out ways of putting the oven coils in the ceiling and putting them in these great columns and shooting these great wide shots where we're always seeing the threat so it was iterative process, I think, ultimately.
I find it so interesting that you're basically experiencing escape rooms backwards from everybody else, where it's like we come from the perspective of, we've tried it where it's all fun and games, and now we're about to watch escape rooms that kill people.
Right. Yeah, I mean, in some ways it probably was good that I was a little green to it, I think, because I was able to go in with like a clean slate and not really be biased. And by the way, I'm terrible at them. My writer and her boyfriend are like, I'm just like, let me know when you solve it, and they built one over in Hollywood, Escape Hotel in Hollywood, and they mirrored some of the rooms. I think they have the crushing room, and then they're going to do the hospital as well. And it took me like 20 minutes to realize, oh wait, the pictures on the walls have the clock hands Sense. Right. That was the movie that I just directed. Right. So I'm a little slow. I would definitely die.
I love scenarios that make you think, how will I fare in that kind of situation?
You do. She loves those.
Escape rooms are such a toss-up for me, though, because I feel like I could do it if I was by myself. But the second teamwork is involved, everybody else will frustrate me.
But you have to have the team to make it work.
Or
No,
you
that's
can't
true.
get out.
And it's great team building. And, you never, and that's the thing we loved is like you don't know who's going to succeed. And we sort of equated it to like the Navy SEALs and where, the strongest, toughest dude in the room not necessarily is going to survive, whether it's ego or self-preservation. We like this idea of like this pressure cooker causing people to rise to the occasion, and so that was part of the fun as well.
When you did them, did you do them with groups of strangers ever?
Mostly with my writer and her boyfriend and her sister. So it was a friendly group, but yeah, there was a couple. I don't think there was ever a time where we were with strangers. That'd be kind of awkward, I think, ultimately.
It is, but it's also fun.
Yeah.
They do them at press junkets sometimes, and you'll get put with a bunch of people you don't know.
Okay.
And you learn a lot about people really
do.
quickly.
Right.
The one that sticks out in my head is for the second Purge movie, Purge Anarchy, and they had a truck going around the country, and you were in there with a group of people, and at one point we were in a morgue room, and someone had to climb into the
Wait, so
little
the truck
cave.
is the actual escape room?
Yeah, there. I believe it was something like 2 semis that connected.
Yeah.
Whoa.
Yeah, did you do that one
I
too?
did as well,
And
yeah.
I went in with a whole group of people that I did not know.
It's cool.
And it
Wow.
was cool.
It's funny to see who's willing to do what too.
Right.
Like
guess who climbed in there?
Right, you were good to crawl
I did.
into the tiny space, and I was
Exactly.
good to like stick my hand in places where I didn't know what was in there.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's good to know. I'll
Yeah.
file that away.
How do you feel about extreme haunted houses and mazes and stuff? Because we talk about that a lot, kind of where our limits lie.
I mean, I'm a fan, obviously. I think I was saying in another interview, I think we're so bored as a culture. And I think this part of this hunter-gatherer, like we, 10,000 years ago, is like we hunted for our prey and for food and this sense of ennui that we all have with everything sort of handed to us. And so I think these immersive experiences, whether they be an extreme haunted house or an escape room, tap into that next evolution. Look, video games are so frankly, they just decimate Hollywood in terms of box office now. And so I think that's just a natural extension of that, of wanting to kind of be in it, so to speak. And there was some debate on whether people would want to watch people in an escape room versus experience an escape room. And look, we'll see if people show up for it or not. I was wagering if you tell an interesting enough story and are compelled enough by what's happening that you'll be invested. And that we really tried to toe the line. Like some of the clues are maybe a little easier, so people will, maybe people get the Rudolph reference, but then others hopefully keep them guessing and trying to figure it out and looking around the room, because that's what you want. You want an audience to be actively engaged in the movie versus a passive experience.
I'm surprised I didn't think about that while I was watching it, because personally I think you pull that off quite well. It's
cool.
also like that ticking clock kind of feeling, where I think in certain rooms you establish something bad is going to happen if this isn't accomplished in a certain period of time. That automatically kind of gets your heart racing.
Yeah, and thank you. It's really hard too, because and I think these modern thrillers, a lot of the first act is gone now. People want to just, everybody's on Twitter and everybody's bored, like they're ADD. We all have ADD, and so there's a tendency to want to throw the audience in, like we do in the movie. But the character development struggles a little bit when you're at an 11 and you're trying to survive, and it's like you don't have those beats of just breathing and having a moment where people are just connecting on a human level. Because when you're just trying to survive and the bomb's going to go off, it's hard to be like, oh, tell me about your childhood.
I'm really curious about why you guys chose to start the movie the way that you did, because it's a bold move, but that's what you do.
Yeah, I think it was just speaking to that thing of grabbing them quickly and throwing them into an experience. I mean, is there a version of the movie that we could tell linearly? Sure, and I always, as a writer, I'd like to tell things linear in a way, because it always feels like a bit of a cheat when you kind of, all right, and 3 days ago or whatever. And but it was purely just to kind of to throw them onto the ride a little bit, because we knew we were gonna, and even I had to make some choices because there was a great introduction to Deb's character where she's on the freeway on the way to the building and she gets pulled over by the cop and she has this great little monologue that she just crushed in her audition. And it was like I had to make that choice as the director, like, do I spend one more day in the billiard room where I know I need it and where I know the set is going to be built, or do I go out and take my whole crew out to a road and do a half page that might get cut anyway? All that being said, I miss those 80s and 90s where these movies had longer first acts, and we gave a little. You were invested more a little bit before the thing of the movie started.
There's something to be said for that quick cold open type thing, though.
Yeah,
like where it just kind of it digs its claws in right from the start and it's got you.
Yeah, and it shows you what kind of movie you're getting. I think from the and we always wanted to. I always just felt like it was like an answer to. The producers very much didn't want to make a torture porn movie. They wanted to make a movie that was a thrill ride. And so that was part of it, was to start with the going downhill real fast.
I love that little insight into just like a realistic way of deciding what the first scene should be, which I feel like a lot of people who watch horror movies don't think that way, like taking your crew out for something that might get cut.
Yeah.
That's always a fascinating thing for me to hear, just about what really goes through a director and producer's head when it comes down to the day of, do we shoot this or what do we do?
Yeah, it's tough. You're really limited. Look, and shooting in Cape Town, if I had shot this movie locally, like Blum, like with Insidious, we had, I think, 30 days. With this movie, I had 43 days, but that opening scene, everything was practical. So we moved the wall 3 feet, everything topples. Like then I had the crew has to come in and reset everything. So it took like literally, we were going probably 20, 25 minutes between each take, but with for that sequence, we were down sometimes 2 hours before cameras would roll again. So you have to make choices, unfortunately. I just chose to. I was like, these rooms will be struck, they'll be destroyed, and I could always go and steal a shot of Deb on the road if I needed it later on, So, but yeah, it's tough. I mean, you're always fighting against time, always.
I feel like there's probably no one better to do a shot like that with than Logan Miller.
Oh, yeah.
I talk about him often because I feel like people don't talk about him enough. He is so talented, and he should be a more familiar household name.
He's hilarious. He's an amazing actor. I put him through the absolute ringer. I think he hated my guts by the end of it.
That's an understatement.
But he really delivers, and he has that scrappy, because when you meet these characters, not everybody. The other thing with trauma is like some people, like for example, Jason's character, he becomes a adrenaline junkie, and he's overachieving. I think Zoe retires inward and goes inward and is very, very anxious. And then somebody like Logan, who starts to drink and substance abuse and hates himself. And I thought it was important to show people from all different levels of that spectrum. Logan just brings an inherent likability to the thing, even though he's kind of a punk at the beginning and probably has the biggest arc in the movie in terms of becoming selfless. But in a weird way, we hope that they achieve some weird catharsis by going into the gauntlet. It's a weird therapy session at the end of the day. By facing death again, you learn to live again in a way. So
that's one heck of an ensemble you got there.
Yeah, they were all great, weren't they?
Yeah, they really all shine, and it's like, having someone with particular characteristics paired with other people, it gives, I think, everybody out there someone to maybe not even identify with, but in this kind of ensemble piece, I feel like everybody can look at this and say, oh, that one's my favorite.
Right. Yeah, and Tyler Labine, who is hilarious, and everything he does is just all those little ads that he brought so much to that role. And initially we were going to go with like the fuddy-duddy, like working class guy, and he has that element because he has that everyman quality, but he also has that hilarious kind of quirky humor that he brings to it. So Nick Dodani, who is very, very funny, he's a stand-up comedian. He's on Murphy Brown now, and just seemed like the right choice for that quirky, like the guy who's been to 1,000 of these already. And Jay Ellis, who is so charismatic and just kind of commands the scene and a bit of an alpha, and you could see how he could run roughshod over people. and Taylor, who came in and just blew me away. Her audition was just because you wanted Zoe to be really vulnerable, but also ultimately have this reserve of strength. And Taylor just crushed the audition. And Deborah Ann Wall, who everybody just are in love with, and
of course,
all the department heads. It was like, oh, Deb. She was so amazing on set and really supportive. And and should be an action star, I think. You know.
Yes.
So,
I found this very convincing.
yeah, cool, good. She was excited. She was excited to do that, the crazy climbs and stuff, and she did all of her own stunts, and yeah.
You'll never hear me say bad things about Daredevil, which was like one of my favorite shows, but she could have thrown a punch or two in there. I would have watched that.
Is she a bit of a pacifist in that movie, in that show? She doesn't really fight.
She's not a fighter. She's
not a fighter.
She's a writer, and
Right.
she seeks truth and justice through the pen.
I feel like that
mightier
should
than
go
the sword.
on a
I'm
coffee
a fighter,
mug
not a writer.
somewhere.
I'm a writer, not a fighter. Yeah.
Some of us are both.
Right.
Why not?
Yeah. But yes, that's very exciting to see. I love her career, and I just love seeing her get to do new things.
She's great. I think she's going to be a huge star. I know it. I mean, I think she can do anything she wants, really. So.
Can you talk a little bit about your trajectory as a director, just going from your first feature into a franchise now to something like this, which I think does have franchise potential? Is there any kind of goals? And also, we were talking about this a lot before, too, just the idea of, like you're a horror director right now. So do you want to stay within that genre, or are you looking to branch out, too?
I tend to gravitate towards dark stuff. I mean, my first film, The Taking of Deborah Logan, was a bald attempt at sort of going after the business of, at the time, it was like, oh, Devil Inside made all this money. And I had written a script called The Bloody Benders that Guillermo del Toro had optioned. And I was waiting for him. He was going to direct it for Pacific Rim. And every couple of months I would, dear Mr. Guillermo, and it was waiting and was just waiting on pins and needles. And 3 years went by, and I was like, oh man, maybe I should make a movie. It wasn't like I wanted to just, I popped out of the womb wanting to direct. It was just, I wanted to do something. And so I pitched this idea to Bad Hat Harry Productions. Basically, I showed them this clip of this woman who had early onset Alzheimer's disease, and she was like early 40s, and she was talking quite lucidly about what it was going to be like to lose her mind, and she was writing notes on mirrors. It was very devastating. And then it cuts to her a year later, and she's in an adult high chair. Her skin is the color of your cup. Oof. She's going from like rage to giggling to just crying in the spell of like 10 seconds. So scary. And I said, I want to do this as a possession movie. So start with a really grounded medical documentary. They're documenting the disease and her progression, her debilitation, and then something starts to spin off and it becomes sort of a paranormal kind of situation. And they got really excited. So to answer your question, my first film was really just like, what can I do for a price? Because it was like I had to be what's also going to be something that's going to hopefully make my financiers a little bit of money or at least break even so that I get to go make another movie. So it was really that bald kind of like strategic thinking. And a lot of my grandmother, who was like my mom, is in that character. And when I discovered Jill Larson and her audition, and she just was so creepy. And I tell you, first-time filmmakers that are trying to make genre movies, like, you're not going to get visual effects. You're not going to get... So your special effects are your performances, and find a great performer, build an idea around the actors, because that's where you're going to shine, And and Millennium struck a deal with Bryan Singer's company for that, and I think ultimately they didn't believe in the movie. They just wanted to be in business with Bryan at the time. And we had one test screening, which was terrible. The movie wasn't done. The money shot at the end of the movie. I don't know if you guys have seen it, but she her jaw distends and she swallows this little girl's head, and so that wasn't in the test screening. And so the test screening failed, and they brought me in and sat me down and they gave me this book of tome of like how my movie's not going to perform with any demographic. And I was devastated. And you get a number at the end of a test screening, and it's like that number becomes like a tattoo on your head, like Hester Prynne. And I was like, I'm screwed. This is it. 3 years of my life, I went into debt. And so they just dumped it unceremoniously to Netflix in 2014. And then that week of Halloween, it got shared and became viral. And over 1 million people shared the image and then went back and discovered the movie. And it became our first like review in the genre space was like, it's creatively bankrupt in big bold letters. So that was like my first, like, you go through this gauntlet of 3 years, you get the first review and it's like creatively bankrupt. So I was like, wow. man, welcome to prime time. But it just got discovered, and that was, and James Wan saw it and was like, this is really creepy. It's creep versus just jump scares, and I love this atmosphere. And so he was one of the first to kind of benite the movie. So I'm so grateful for that. And yeah, and then when Leigh Whannell it was clear he didn't want to direct Insidious, I was sort of on a short list, and I went in, and I've been in a few horror films with Lin Shaye as an actor, and so I knew Lin and sort of a bit of a family there, and I went for the fences with the audition. Like I think I had like $1,500 left in my bank account, and I did previs and storyboards and the biggest thing I said was, this movie needs a demon, because Lee's made 3 of the movies, and he was just like, I think he wanted to go in a different direction. And I said, if you're going to do Insidious, you need the big bad, I think, to really I think of Lipstick Demon, I think of the man who couldn't breathe, and so Keyface was born out of that sort of that push, and that was amazing. I mean, I learned so much from Lee, and was thrown right into doing a movie for Universal and Sony at the same time, and Jason. So it was in some ways, in retrospect, it was more like a TV job, in the sense of, there's an established world, and I had to just, I found I was like this custodian of this world, but it was more of like a let's keep the torch going versus like reinventing the wheel.
What an inspiring journey. Yeah. The way you were describing that first home, all I could picture is like, that's the horror filmmaker version of having the nightmare where you go to high school with no clothes on or something.
It's terrible. And these test screenings, and that's like, these test screenings are tough. And with Escape Room, you have a final test screening, and if it doesn't do, and we shot a new ending, and if the ending doesn't work, and like, will they market it? And so you're constantly against the gauntlet of, and I have my doubts about test screenings. I think it's not a fair process, and what 300 people think in Thousand Oaks on a particular night, if there was a bad news cycle, or if Trump opened his mouth, or everybody's in a bad mood, and so you get that one number, and it makes them feel safer to go, okay, the movie's playing, or the movie's not working, and so what do we do? And so I understand the value, but it's just crippling for the filmmaker, and you have to kind of go through it. But I hear like even the Aronofskys of the world, I mean, they, it's the same thing.
That's true.
So
it is crazy though to just think, like, especially now that Twitter really highlights how crazy and foolish and silly some people are, to be like, they just chose 300 randos and they decide the future of your whole film.
Right.
Wow.
Yeah. No, it's a little bit by committee. And I go back to like, and not that I'm Steve Jobs, but like Steve Jobs, when he made the iPhone, people didn't know they wanted an iPhone.
Right.
If you go cookie cutter, and from the marketing perspective, and having just been to Brazil, like I see the power, and you need a concept that's going to be able to cut through, that they can sell. And that's why superhero movies are here to stay, because they sort of, it's an archetype now. It's like the new religion, for better or worse, And so it's harder and harder to get people in seats. Nobody's going to the movies anymore. And so you need a concept that's really going to cut through. And so I think and you want the movie to be playable. Right. So I get it. I'm just kvetching, I guess.
Well, even you mentioned Hitchcock. Like, he was a man who knew you needed a gimmick. Like, most of his best films were built around some really clever gimmick.
Yeah.
Lifeboat, rope, something like that.
Absolutely. 100%.
Well, even this one, I know you said not comparing it to Saw, but the one that I liken it to most is the effect that Final Destination had on me, because that was one with kill scenes and scares that were all directly tied to who those people were and where they had come from before. And it's got this effect where you get through one set piece and then you can't wait for the next set piece, and then the next one, and then the next one. So hopefully it will have that rewatchable quality
let
too.
Let me tell you, that's quite a compliment coming from this one.
She
loves
an
Final
obsession
Destination.
with Final Destination.
I that's great. I think Final Destination is a great comparison, and the movie that was most influential, at least in approaching the material for me, was The Game by Michael Douglas. Yeah, sorry Fincher. Michael Douglas apparently directed The Game. The Game had qualities of I just loved how, going into Nicolas Nicholas Van Orton's past and this sort of Dickensian kind of story. This like David Copperfield. He goes back in his childhood with his brother and his relationship, and so that was kind of what most. But yeah, I can totally see how Final Destination would vibe with you for sure.
I know we're getting a little ahead of ourselves now, but because of the way this industry works, where you can't just make one film and hope that it does well and then not be prepared for more. So does the studio kind of have your mind in that zone as well? You don't want to put the cart before the horse, so to speak, but you want to be prepared.
Gotta build a cart.
Yeah, we have a lot of ideas for rich mythology for... it was important for me to... It's always hard in these movies when you pull back the veil and you're like, who's the big bad behind the curtain? And it was important to me to just have a low-level cipher. So Yorick in the movie, no spoilers, but ultimately it's an asymmetrical organization and he doesn't know who he's really working for. We wanted to keep that open. And if I was going to show any of the workings of the organization, I wanted to do it in an unexpected way, which is how the movie ends. But yeah, we would love to. I think there's been a lot of like spitballs, but we haven't, because I think it would be a bit arrogant to assume that there's going to be another. The market and the fans will decide that.
We've seen that blow up in many a franchise.
Yeah.
For sure.
We do not need that to happen.
And by the way, we do, the tag is a bit of that, and I'm sure we'll get some grumbles, but we wanted to end on. It was important to end for me on a fun note that was like, oh, what's going to happen now? So we'll see. We'll see.
Creative possibilities seem endless.
Yeah.
You could really design just about any room you want out there.
Absolutely. Yeah. We did do a lot of the good ones, though. I think any other writer comes in and be like, damn, they took gravity, burning, fire. It's like, just going to be a vat of snakes.
Did you find that you started thinking in escape rooms while you were making the film? Like, hey, that'd be a good one.
We found that a lot of spaces started to look ominous. Like you'd be in a room like this and I'd be like looking at the doors.
Could you imagine if we turned this into an escape room?
Thanks for that nightmare. That will be with me for a while.
There's
now.
a good idea.
One of the big pitches is that the Minos organization, like how far do they go and how much of real life are they playing with? And the idea of expanding it to the real world in a way, which could be kind of interesting.
Yeah.
We had a pitch where at the end of the movie, obviously it doesn't end this way, but Zoe and Ben are in an IHOP, and suddenly all the doors slam shut, and like a painting pops off a wall, and like 3 Japanese schoolgirls come out of a vent. And
that's very cheeky.
My friend was like, because IHOPs are scary.
If you had to design an escape room for yourself, where would it be? What would be the theme?
Oh man, that's a really interesting question. I mean, there's so many. It would be cool to do one like in Dracula's castle somewhere, but and then I go into that's a little on the nose. Would be like it seems like the Situation Room with Trump would be the most horrifying one to be. Trump Tower. Yeah,
oh
that would
my
be.
God.
Or Saudi consulate. Oh, too soon. I shouldn't. Too soon.
We did talk about going dark in here.
I thought my whole box of bees ideas would be a terrible place to get caught there.
Yeah, that would be bad. It'd be bad.
This was great. Thank you so much
for
coming in today. Guys, Escape Room in theaters on January 4th. When I said that earlier about the first big horror movie of the year, now you've had that twice in a row.
Yeah, and
Insidious was the first weekend of this year.
Yeah, so knock on wood.
That's super cool.
Go see it. Hopefully no snowstorms. So.
Yeah.
Well, thankfully, we're in LA, so we'll pretend that nobody else has any other weather problems. Again, Adam, thank you for coming. Do you have any social media or anywhere where our listeners and viewers can find you?
On all the stuff, just under my name, Adam Robitel, Robitel. You'll find me on Twitter and Instagram and... Yeah, the Snapchattis. I actually don't do Snapchat. I don't understand it.
Is that a thing anymore?
I don't know.
I think for the youths.
Yeah.
For the youths?
I think they like that.
Old?
Okay.
Yeah, the snaps
Probably.
and the chats.
All that good stuff. Thank you guys so much for checking out this exclusive Witching Hour interview for Escape Room. That's it. We're done for now, but we will have more episodes for you real soon.